If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of Final Fantasy XIV. We cover the stories both big and small, the epic and the cute, the silly and the tragic. I hope you all enjoy the ride, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. In Raz-Ad-Han, the delegate from Ishgard has been waiting for you. The effects of the final days has reached Ishgard, and one of the blasphemies has appeared in the Holy See. That's scary enough, but to make matters even worse, the blasphemy took on the form of a dragon. A dragon attacking Ishgard again really makes the people terrified, which will make more people turn into blasphemies, which means that thing needs to be dealt with quickly. Emmerich's been assembling a hunting party, but the fact that fear and despair can turn people into blasphemies limits the choices of people he has to join the hunt, which means a battle mage of your skill would be incredibly useful, and of course you're willing to help. So the delegate calls ahead so Lord Artoirel will be ready for you. Having you show up to fight is something both he and Emmerich are grateful for, and since they know you're busy dealing with the chaos that the final days has caused around the world, they get straight to the point. A few days ago, after the first blasphemy started appearing at Raz-Ad-Han, and Elizan was seen wandering around the Hoplan. The way he moved was strange. Then all of a sudden he collapsed and turned into a dragon. As soon as people saw the change, their fear made them turn, and since there's no way to cure those who turn, the Temple Knights had to put them down. But the first blasphemy got away. To keep it simple, they named it Profane Fafnir after a dragon man from an old Ishgardian story. Since the day it flew away, it's been seen flying over Ishgard on more than one occasion. It doesn't attack, it just circles the city, creeping people out before it vanishes again. Every time it's seen, more people get scared and turn, then the cycle continues. The first thing Artoirel and his group have been doing is trying to find out who the first man who changed was, but they haven't learned all that much. But they have found something all of the people who turned have in common. They were all very devout members of the church, like priests or inquisitors. After Ishgard's dark secrets were revealed, everything the church stood for was called into question. A lot of Ishgardians had a hard time realizing that their beliefs were wrong, and the higher-ups in the church had more problems with that than most, which would make them more vulnerable to the transformations. Needless to say, Ishgard can't really handle any more chaos after only recently coming out of a 1,000-year-long war. So this needs to be resolved, and there's a member of the clergy named Clem that they were getting ready to go and talk to see if he can help. He was the only one who saw the dragon transformation and didn't turn. He's a deacon at the cathedral, so the three of you head there to see what he knows. Having three high-profile individuals come to see him is extremely out of the ordinary, but Clem is ready to help in any way that he can, so he gives you a rundown of everything that happened on the day the blasphemy appeared. The church was in the process of moving the vault's libraries to the cathedral. They were carrying some tomes over when they saw a young man staggering around before he transformed into a beast. As soon as the thing looked at them, they ran, but Clem saw the people who were with him start to change too, one after another until he was alone. As he retells you the story, Bishop Vartanwal shows up. He'd heard that the three of you were there, and he'd come to express his gratitude for the efforts you're all making in an attempt to save everyone. He also makes it known that he's willing to help in any way that he can. All you have to do is ask. Since the bishop is the head of St. Ramanos, he's a powerful ally to have. Now that Thornton is gone, he's the most powerful man in the church. Despite his power, Clem says the bishop hasn't let it go to his head. Clem is also more than willing to help, but he does need your help as well. After the transformation started, a group of clergymen fled the city in fear. They went and hid in the woods, but there's plenty of stuff out there to be scared of, so they may be more at risk of transforming out there than they would in the city. Clem will go search for them, but he can't exactly fight, so he needs some fighters to go with him. Of course, the three of you are willing to help. They headed out to the western highlands, so you all split up and search for them. You find them all, and they're surprisingly unharmed, but they refuse to come back to the city. Because of Emmerich and his revolution, the people of Ishgard hate the church. They shun them, and now it looks like people are causing the clergymen to turn into monsters, and the Inquisitor thinks that Emmerich has something to do with it. As he snaps at the man, it causes him to turn into a monster and he runs off. The others try to keep the remaining church folk calm while you run off to deal with the beast. It wasn't all that strong, so you bring it down pretty easily. While you were gone, Clem managed to convince the other clergymen to head back to the city, so you all escort them back so nothing eats them along the way. Back in Ishgard, Aymeric and Artoirel are still worried that the clergymen might turn like the Inquisitor, since they very likely want to return to the old days just like the Inquisitor had, which makes sense since the church has been in turmoil since the way they were manipulating the people was made public. And since faith was always important to the Ishgardians, the people are having a hard time getting over the betrayal. The clergy are having the hardest time getting over it, which has them in an unstable emotional state and makes them super vulnerable to the transformations. That knowledge doesn't do much to help with finding the blasphemy, so there's still a lot of work to be done. A little while later, after Deacon Clem gets the clergyman to talk, he comes by to tell the three of you what he's found out. Those particular clergymen were all close friends of the Inquisitor who turned, and like him, they'd experienced a lot of harassment in the city, and their experiences aren't unique. A lot of the clergy are openly hated by the people, and to some extent they deserve it, but they were misled too, so a lot of them were victims just like the rest of Ishgard. Since the Dragonsong War came to an end, peace came to the city for most, but the clergy pretty much lost everything. Knowing that they had been tools used to oppress the people did a number on them, and they didn't have anywhere to turn for guidance. But Clem thinks the church will redeem itself one day and once again be a beacon of hope for the people. That's what's kept him going, which is why, unlike some of the other clergy, he's avoided turning into a monster. The change takes people who feel a strong sense of despair, and most of Ishgard's people don't have many reasons to feel that way, which is why it's only the clergy who is really at risk. If the final days had happened during Nidhogg's attacks on the city, that would have been a completely different story. Since Clem has managed to hold off the transformations, Aymeric wants him to tell the other clergymen how to do the same thing, which should solve one problem. Now all that's left is to find profane Fafnir's identity and deal with him. He wasn't a clergyman from what Clem had seen. He was dressed like a commoner. Bits and pieces of the person's personality stays behind when they become a blasphemy, so finding out what Fafnir spends most of his time doing could be another way to find out who he used to be, which will help stop him. There had to be more people at the Hoplon who could have seen Fafnir's transformation, and they may be able to tell you more about what the dragon did after it first transformed, which means there's more detective work to do. A lot of people saw the man who changed. His name was Vaindro, and he was a patient in the infirmary. Since he turned into a dragon, people assumed that he was a dragon blood drinking heretic. The fact that the man had the same name as a former member of the Heavens Ward is a bit interesting, but Sir Vaindro had retired when he got old a few years ago, so the man definitely isn't him. But the infirmary is at least a small lead that you can follow. Laverick, the aide who was in charge of the infirmary, has quite a bit to tell you about the lost patient. A patrol had found him out in the Central Highlands and had treated him before bringing him to the city. He was young and seemed healthy, but when he said his name was Vaindro, he didn't seem sure, but there was no way to confirm his identity at the time. Laverick wants you to find him because he's in no condition to be wandering around. Apparently the man didn't know that his lost patient had turned into a monster. He doesn't take the news well, but he does have some useful information that can help move your Scooby-Doo style monster hunt forward. While Vaindro was unconscious, he mentioned the Archbishop and Vartenoir a lot, which means it's possible that the two have actually had some dealings with one another that you should ask about. Aymeric decides it will be a good idea to request an audience with the man, just in case he does know something. The man agrees to see you all right away, but when you get to the congregation, Clem says the bishop had gotten called away on urgent business, so he headed off to the cathedral. He just left, so you rush off to catch the man because it's a little fishy that he set up a meeting with you, then just ran off. He's not hard to find, but he seems uncomfortable when you, Aymeric, Artoirel, and Clem show up. When Aymeric asks him about Vaindro, he says he doesn't know him, but you have a useful tool called the Echo that allows you to see into the bishop's past, which proves he's lying. You see the bishop and two clergymen out in Oz's Law where he was trying to recreate the ritual that gave Thornton his primal powers. He hadn't believed what Aymeric had said to be true at first, but he'd found Thornton's journal, and he had written about how all you needed was a lot of ether and prayers of the people to make gods out of men. There's plenty of ether in Oz's Law, and he brought Thornton's sword as well as a corpse to channel the power into, which seems like a brilliant thing to do. But he hopes to bring back Thornton and his knights to restore Ishgard to its former glory. He doesn't realize just how much ether was used to transform Thornton, and he doesn't have nearly enough. All that they do is change the corpse into what looks like a regular, not dead, but very weak man. He mutters about protecting his eminence, but falls over. Vartanois decides to go check Thornton's journal to see what he did wrong, and as for the failed summon, he decides to leave it there for the creatures of Azizla to deal with. When you tell Emmerich what you saw, he immediately goes to arrest the bishop. The man snaps, and to nobody's surprise, he transforms right in the middle of the city, only to get brought down by Emmerich. This is a serious blow for Deacon Clem, so Artoirel decides to stay with the man until he's sure he won't turn, while you head back to the congregation to wait for him with Emmerich. Seeing the bishop turn actually makes Clem more motivated to help the other clergymen, so that's a good thing. But the fact that one of the highest ranking members of the church could be so emotionally messed up that they would turn proves just how bad the current situation is. Emmerich thinks that it could in fact be partially his fault for pushing so hard to separate the church and state, which divided the people even faster. But Artoirel is more interested in hearing about your vision than Emmerich's self-doubt. The fact that the bishop tried to use Allegan Tech to summon a primal makes Artoirel mad enough to where if the man wasn't dead already, he probably would have killed him. But the fact that it failed and summoned a man who had the desire to protect the archbishop is proof that they didn't have enough ether for the true summoning, which is obvious because they had Nidhogg's Eye the last time they had tried that. And since you dealt with the Warring Triad, their ether wasn't in Azizla either. But even though there wasn't enough ether, they did have all of the parts they needed for the spell, which is why they did summon the very weak champion that they got. The real question is, how did the man end up in the Central Highlands, because he is very likely your target. Emmerich sends out some temple knights to find the clergymen who helped the bishop's summoning, and as soon as they found them, they turned and were dealt with, which will make it difficult to find out if the clone is the man who became the dragon. So instead, Emmerich wants to follow the man's trail from Azizla to see how he got to Kurthus. Of course, that's only if you get there and the clone's body isn't where the bishop left it. Artoirel decides to go check out Azizla, while you and Emmerich head to Camp Dragonhead, where the man was supposedly taken after he was found. On the day the stranger was found, one of the guards at the camp had seen an airship flying way too low before it disappeared in a snowstorm. When they brought the man in from Providence Point where they found him, he was suffering from some serious frostbite. They did the little they could for him before they sent him to the city. The stories Emmerich heard pretty much match yours, so Emmerich wants to find this crashed airship, and he's hired some chocobo to fly the two of you around. It doesn't take long for the two of you to find the downed airship. What you didn't expect was to find the Blasphemy lying down beside it. The echo hits you and you see the clone stumble out of the ship before passing out and waking up in the hospital in Ishgard. He couldn't remember his name, but the only names floating around in his head were those of the Heavens Ward, probably because they tried to use him to summon Thornton and all of the knights like they were one primal. That bishop really had no idea how primals worked. None of the names fit him until he saw an image of the old knight Vaindro in his mind. The memory showed the man being too lowborn to ever be the leader of the Temple Knights like he wanted, but the Archbishop gave him a position at his side, and from that day forward he pledged his very life to the man. It's only then that he remembers that he's a knight of the Heavens Ward. When he tells Lovric that, the man had told him that the Heavens Ward hadn't been seen for a while and everyone believes they're dead, but the Archbishop is definitely dead. That news seems to shatter Vaindro's mind, because there's no way he could be alive if Thornton wasn't, since he was sworn to give his life to keep the man that way. So he heads out to find the Archbishop, which leads to him turning and bringing you back to your current situation. You snap out of the vision in time to see Fafnir flying over you and Emmerich. He says something about the glory of King Thornton and flies off. Your visions really happened at the worst possible times, but at least you didn't die, so the two of you head back to Ishgard to let Artoirel know what you found, and what you saw. On his trip to Azizla, the only thing Artoirel found was Thornton's sword, Ascalon, which confirms that the Blasphemy is in fact the clone, so Emmerich lets the man know about the crashed airship that the clone probably found in Azizla, which pretty much ties together the last threads of how this all started. Even though the Heavens Ward were a big source of the problems in Ishgard, leaving a twisted dragon version of one of them flying around isn't something that Emmerich wants to do, especially since it will cause more people to turn if the truth behind this event comes out, and adds to the issues between the people and the church. The reasons they have bad blood between them don't need to be forgotten, but they do need to find a unified path forward. That thought makes Emmerich decide to call for an ecumenical council so the church can write out their new doctrine so people can know that they have a new role separate from what used to be. Obviously that won't fix things, but it's a start. Despite the ecumenical council being the most important formal gathering the church can call, one that hasn't happened in 80 years, the people gathered for it fast. The event is normally sealed to only the top officials, but since Vartanwar is very dead, this one is open to the public, which gives every citizen of Ishgard the right to have a say in how the church will conduct itself in the future. Since the founding of the church, it served the people in two ways. It was meant to fight the dragons and protect the souls of the people. But since man and dragon are at peace, half of their purpose is gone, so they have to decide how they can better serve the people. As with everything political, there are differing opinions, but after a lot of arguing back and forth, which is bad since that could cause people to turn into monsters, Emmerich does what he does best and gives a speech that helps the people get their stuff together. Their legends did hide betrayal and lies, but it wasn't all bad, so the church needs to accept the blame and get over it. The church was the foundation of the nation, so there's no way to tear it down and keep everything functioning, so the regular folk need to get over that. That way they can keep their history, who they are, and still grow together, which is something they can all agree on. It'll be a long road, but at least they're willing to walk it together. Emmerich's meeting turns out to be a success, which means you can get back to dealing with Fafnir, and Emmerich had Clem get something for him that he thinks will be very useful in dealing with the blasphemy. Since the thing's instinct is to protect the Archbishop, that could explain why it randomly flies over Ishgard. It's keeping watch over the vault where Fury's Grace, the staff of the Archbishop, was supposed to be. If Emmerich runs around holding that, then Fafnir will definitely come to him, which will make it easy to draw him away and deal with him. As long as Emmerich can avoid getting eaten first. It's a stupid risk for someone as important as Emmerich to take. There's a reason why you don't send your generals out to fight wars. People might not like to say it, but there are some people who are more valuable than others, and Emmerich is far more valuable to Ishgard than a common temple knight. But he thinks he has to be the one to do this, which means you have to keep him alive. Sure enough, when Emmerich holds the staff and calls out for his knights, Fafnir shows up. But when he realizes that Emmerich isn't Thornton, he attacks. The blasphemy is no pushover, especially since he's able to use the magic of a lot of the Heavensward members, but you fought them all before, so you, Emmerich, and Artoirel are more than capable of bringing down the beast, and finally putting an end to the tale of the Heavensward, and allowing them to rest, and Ishgard to move forward toward what should be a brighter future. This concludes the story of Endwalker's Magic DPS questline. If you enjoyed this video, do the YouTube stuff. Hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, join the Discord, and if you really want to show your support, sign up to become a member of the channel. Until next time guys, later.